Hi, I'm Nikki Lowe, and welcome to the Wisdom for Working Mums podcast show, where I share insights and interviews that support women to combine their family, work, and life in a more successful and sustainable way. Does public speaking leave you hot under the collar with sweaty palms? You're not alone if it does. In a survey on social anxiety, people placed death third on their list of their biggest fears. The two top responses were walking into a room full of strangers and speaking in public. So whether you're a seasoned pro or just starting out, the fear of public speaking is something that can affect us all. But fear not, because I have a brilliant guest with us today who is here to share her wisdom and expertise on this very subject. My guest is Suzie Lavington, who has made her mark as a sought-after public speaking coach. With a background in corporate leadership and a passion for empowering individuals to find their voice, Suzie has helped countless professionals overcome their fear of speaking in public and stepped confidently onto any stage. Public speaking is a powerful skill we need to learn, especially as women. And why? First off, when we can speak confidently in public, we're making sure our voices are heard and counted. It's about equal representation in workplaces and beyond. It helps us climb the career ladder and helps us land leadership roles. But it's not just about careers. Confident public speaking also lets us champion causes close to our hearts. It's a way to influence change and inspire action. Networking, yep, it's a biggie too. Speaking engagement offer opportunities to connect with movers and shakers, which can open doors for new opportunities. And on a personal level, it's a boost of self-esteem. It's about being able to express ourselves, our ideas and our experiences with confidence. And it can be a game changer when it comes to breaking stereotypes and pushing against gender bias. Plus, it's inspiring. I don't know about you, but when I see other women speak up and speak out, they become powerful role models, motivating me to want to do the same. So in a nutshell, confident public speaking empowers us as women on multiple fronts, professionally, personally, and in society. And it's not just about talking, it's about making a difference and shaping our world. And in this episode, Suzie will be sharing her invaluable insights, tips and techniques to boost your confidence and enhance your public speaking skills, whether you're looking to ace that next presentation at work, nail a job interview, or simply to feel more confident when speaking up in meetings. Suzie's expertise is here to guide us. So grab your notepad, get ready to take some notes and prepare to be inspired as we delve into the world of public speaking and confidence with the wonderful Suzie Lavington. So welcome, Suzie. I'm really excited to have you here to talk about this topic today, because I think it's a topic that so many women and people struggle with in general, and your insights and expertise are going to be phenomenal. So welcome.
Oh, Nicola, thank you. Absolutely made up to be here.
So for those that don't yet know about you and the work that you do, could you give us an insight into who you are and kind of the journey that you've taken to do the work that you now do?
Oh, yes. So I am a mum, first off, two marvellous, rambunctious, all-consuming girls. So I've got Amelie, who's 7, and Remy, who's 3. I am the wife of probably the most patient man on the planet. But in terms of career, so I started my career in film production. So always wanted to be an actor from, year dot. But I was too scared to go to drama school. So I was surrounded by lots of friends who were really, in my opinion, really, really good actors. And they were out there trying to make it, and no one was. So I was just too scared to go to drama school, and went into the industry, but started off in production as a runner. Because I thought, well, if I was just in that industry, then that would be good enough. And what happened really was that I started out looking after actors. So sort of some big actors, but also, groups of not so big actors. And what I would do is run them through hair and makeup and then get them on set and then sit and watch them do what I wanted to do. So instead of being kind of, there or thereabouts, it was actually quite torturous. So I eventually went to drama school and just made an almost living in theatre for a good kind of 10 years. But it was, I really struggled with nerves, actually, all the way through my career. And I can say that I probably had a bit of a turning point when I was about 25. So I landed a massive opportunity, and my nerves promptly kissed that opportunity goodbye. So I bombed, I crashed and burned in an audition for the Royal Shakespeare Company. So jumped through lots of hoops to get that final audition. And on the day, it was kind of split into two. So as an actor, a lot of people find it really hard to get their head around. If you struggle with nerves, why on earth would you go into acting? I think it's a lot more common among performers than people realise. Yeah, I think I was so uncomfortable in my own skin that the best relief out of that was to jump into someone else's.
You hear that so often. That's kind of so common, and amongst actors. I remember watching a program. I can't remember what it was called, but a famous director used to interview actors. Oh, I can't remember. It was a TV program, and how common an experience people would say that. So it's interesting.
Yeah, so common. And that's the thing, it's that stability of having someone else's words and a character to hide behind. But then if you would take the script away, then that's when I would fall to pieces, right? So any improvisation I had to do, I just would fall apart. So in that particular audition, I think we were given a script for a couple of days, and we had lots of time to prep, which I love. I'm a real prepper. But then in the afternoon, it was a little surprise. We were introduced to a rhetoric champion. And this guy gave us just a current affairs topic each to stand up and just talk about. And honestly, when it came to my turn, I cannot tell you what I said. It definitely wasn't English. Whatever came out of my mouth was not English. And I could just see at that moment that the lights behind the eyes of all that entire panel, it was a big panel at the Royal Shakespeare Company, their lights just turned out behind their eyes as they realised that actually I probably wasn't as good as they thought I was from the morning. So that was it, right? That was my turning point. I think I made a promise to myself there and then that I was going to get a hold of this debilitating fear that kept knocking me sideways.
So powerful that you did that, because I can feel I'm holding my breath as you're telling that story, because I could just feel, I could imagine myself in that situation and how toe-curlingly painful that must have been in that moment.
Well, it stayed with me. It's one of those things, and we all have them, right? We have them. Often it starts at school. You know, when you stand up and you read out loud in class and you stumble and you realise that other people have thoughts and opinions about you, and suddenly everyone's thoughts and opinions become everything. So it was exactly that. It became a core memory that I have never been able to forget. Never. So I can't, just to sort of wrap that up really, but that was a turning point. I went on a real kind of quest just to try and avoid the journey word that I know not a lot of people like, just to try and sort this out. And that came under lots of guises, but I did eventually bow out of acting because of nerves, but because of, economic reasons and all sorts of things. Got a proper job. And then was at a conference one day, and this incredible speaker called Dr. Andy Cope came along and blew the roof off this place. And I looked at him and I thought, I just want some of that. And so Andy and I stayed in touch. I was very pleasantly persistent, I think they call it. And eventually he sort of said to me, look, Suzie, at the moment, his team, so he was from a company called The Art of Brilliance, speakers and trainers, and his team was full of fellas back then. And he said, look, the one people we do not resonate very well with are teenage girls. So we do lots of work in schools and in businesses. And as you can imagine, teenage girls is kind of a gap. Could you write something? And so I wrote a workshop called A Girl's Guide to Being Fearless, which is all about building self-esteem and confidence in teenage girls, because that's when I felt like it really started to unravel for me in my teenage years. Yeah, that became a book, and I'm still working with Art of Brilliance now, but also as a speaker and speaking coach in my own right, and about to launch a business really helping females, particularly with their speaking.
I love that. And as you say, that kind of quest that you've been on, you can see how it's fueled this passion for the work that you do, and you've got kind of real lived experience to bring to this, not only, I imagine, in your acting training, but in that in those experiences of realizing where we can trip ourselves up from finding our voice and using it and using it in the way that we want to.
Yeah, and knowing, that actually this speaking thing it is a skill. It is a skill. No one is born with a PowerPoint clicker in their hand, and no one is born on a stage. Some people I think they are introduced to those sorts of situations early on, so they definitely pick up confidence. When others don't. But the very fact that literally, I'm saying 5 or 6 years ago, without a script in my hand, the thought of speaking in front of any size group would make me want to run out the door crying. And actually now to doing it as a living, that's, I think, what fires me up, because you kind of go, actually, there are tools, there are tricks, there are tips and techniques. And if you can move, the dial up that much in a short space of time, you just want to share it with people, and just, that's it.
Oh, well, thank you for joining us today to share this, because I'm sure other people like me are sitting there going, if they're listening, going, so how did you do it? But before we dive into the kind of the how, I think it might be worth us taking a step back to just talk about what are some of the common challenges people face, especially when we think about women. You said about girls and women. When it comes to public speaking, what are those challenges?
Yeah, I think the most common challenge, especially for women, but this is arguable, what I'm about to say, I think, it's that mistaken feeling that why should people listen to what I have to say? Who am I to speak up in front of other people? So those sort of thoughts and feelings that, of course, have become known as imposter syndrome, right? And I think, thankfully, people are moving towards a different understanding around imposter syndrome now. So if you listen to any thought leaders on this subject, they hate the term because it just suggests that it is a syndrome, right? It's a condition, it's an affliction that some of us, mostly women, suffer from. And it's not that. It's not a syndrome. It is part of being human. So whether we are male or female, almost all of us feel it, almost all of us. So it's that overwhelming feeling of, I don't deserve to be here. And any success I have had up to now is a fluke, and I'm less capable of the people, I'm less capable than the people around me, and less capable than I really am. And one day very soon, someone is going to find me out. So common. I think there's been a real stack of research, though, done on imposter syndrome. So it became a thing, like a phenomenon back in the 70s. And so much of that research says that women experience it more than men because of things like social conditioning and gender stereotyping. Some corporate cultures that have a lack of female role models in leadership. There might be certain workplace biases, whether they are overt or otherwise. Right? So the list goes on. But some research actually says that men experience imposter syndrome every bit as much as women, actually, but that women self-report feeling it more than men do. So I think just whatever the truth is there, though, the important thing is that we can work to overcome it. Right? Definitely, companies have parts to play, of course they do, in building the sort of equal, inclusive environments where everyone can thrive and be listened to. But while it is so common, I think giving into our imposter too often can be a massive obstacle to achieving what we want to achieve.
Yes. Yeah, no, I completely get that. And I think there's, as you say, it's about finding your inner authority, isn't it? About actually, I have got something to share and, it has value. So if people can get past that piece, what then becomes the challenge?
So there are common challenges that really all start with mindset. So speaking really is made up of two components, mindset and technique. And I would argue that mindset is 90% of the battle. And I think, the big question is, so why do we fear public speaking? If it's not actually dangerous, why do we fear it so much? And it really is, it's all thanks to our ancestors, as so much is. You sort of think back when we were cave-dwelling hunter-gatherers, we shared the planet with lots of man-eating beasts, didn't we? Yeah, so we found ourselves in absolutely a safety in numbers type situation. So we had to form bonds with other people, with other hunter-gatherers in order for us to be accepted into the tribe and survive. Because if we couldn't form those bonds, and we didn't have that sort of reputation, we would be kicked out of the tribe and we would just have to face these sort of beasts alone. Now, obviously, we live in a far less perilous world today, but we are still petrified of being abandoned by the tribe. So this fear is deep-rooted. We are born with it, and it stays with us our entire lives. So really, the big thing is reputation for us. Reputation is everything to us humans. So our natural instinct is to steer clear of anything that might damage that reputation, anything that might make us stand out or look stupid, and just stay firmly inside of our comfort zone. And of course, public speaking puts us out on the skinny branch.
Yes. It's almost exposing, isn't it? You physically are exposed if you're standing on a stage, but actually you're exposing your thoughts and your stories and your information for it to potentially be judged. And as you say, that can leave us feeling incredibly vulnerable.
Sure can. And actually vulnerability, though, is a real superpower when it comes to public speaking. And when we say public speaking, a lot of people, they visualize this is you standing on stage in front of hundreds or tens of people. But actually, more often, it is you and a handful of other people in a meeting. Or it is you and two other people in an interview, or it's you pitching to clients. It is. So we're talking, when we talk about public speaking, we're talking about any situation where the stakes are high. So any situation that isn't just you sat down speaking to a friend over coffee. So that's kind of what we're talking about here, yeah.
And I love that you've clarified that, because it can give the connotations, can't it, about, well, actually, I've got no desire to stand on the stage. So why is this relevant for me? It's actually, whenever you're trying to share a message that has high stakes, as you say. And I know this might be an obvious question, but why is it so important for us to overcome our nerves and perhaps anxiety when we're doing public speaking?
So many reasons. But I think for us, for women especially, and it depends where you do your research on this, but I think the recent stats are that it's less than 32% of leaders across the world are women. And other stats are actually lower, and I'd expect them to be lower, in fact. But I think that given the spectacular things that women can and have done at the top, right? We see this everywhere, don't we? In the world leaders that have been female, I would call that a crying shame. So women make exceptional leaders. Exceptional. They are empathetic. I mean, of course, this is generally speaking, but they are excellent communicators. They're calm under pressure, because they have to be. They're good at bringing people together and fostering more of an environment where people's voices are heard and everyone's voices are heard. So it boggles my mind that there are still so few women at the top. And really, oral communication comes out as the number one skill that companies look for in their leaders, above managerial skills. But actually, leadership and career progression and that sort of stuff aside, the requirement to speak publicly, most of us can't really run from. Don't we know it? Right. So there will be occasions that pop up again and again that require us to speak in public in some form. Okay, whether that is in an interview, whether it's a current job or it's a future job or a friend's wedding. And if you can speak confidently and convincingly and freely and authentically. I know that word gets just thrown around a lot now to the point where it's become a buzzword, but it's massive. It is key to your connection with the audience, your ability to just be you. Yeah, just to just show up and speak as you. And if you can do that, whole worlds of opportunity open themselves up. And it really will. It reverberates across every area of your life. Okay, so yes, it will help you develop leadership qualities, and it will help you speak up in meetings and networking and interviews and that sort of thing. But socially and above all, it will help boost your self-esteem. And self-esteem comes first and confidence follows. So really you feel deserving to be in every room you walk into. You communicate better in your relationships. You can approach people you want to connect with. Honestly, the list is endless. And I think, quite frankly, the world needs more females who are full to the brim with confidence and asserting their thoughts and ideas. You put this really well. So they're asserting their thoughts and ideas without putting them through a bazillion filters first.
Yes, I love that. So what do you think makes a great public speaker? You've kind of alluded to some of the, I suppose, the secret sauce as you've been talking, but what I would love to hear your perspective on it, given that you are in the industry and I imagine you get to see a wide range of kind of fantastic speakers and experience.
Yeah. Oh, okay. So there's a little story actually there that you've made me think of. So when I went on my little kind of, I'm still on this, by the way. I'm not polished. Yeah, I'm not the finished article. I never will be. But when I first started to try and get a hold of these nerves, I would travel to various conferences and, around the world, actually listening to some of the people who are known to be remarkable speakers. And there is one conference that I can recall, and there was a big lineup of speakers, and the first guy came on stage and he had everything on paper that you would imagine equated to him being a remarkable speaker, right? So he looked the part, just the sharpest suit on in the world. He roamed he owned the stage. And this was at the Armadillo in Glasgow. So this was a massive conference centre. His charisma filled the room. There was not a quibble in his voice. Honestly, just everything he had going for him, this guy. But he didn't influence me in any way. He didn't move me. I didn't connect to anything he was saying. And then after him, this woman came on stage, and I've got to be really careful here and quite objective, because I've got to ask myself, was it a gender thing? Did I connect to the second speaker because she was female versus the first? And I've got to say, I genuinely don't think it was, and I've spoken to lots of people about this who were in the room at the time. And so after the first guy, this woman got on stage, and she had this little Scottish voice, and she was visibly and audibly nervous. And she stood behind this podium, and she talked about a time in her career. She was a campaigner, and she talked about a time in her career where she campaigned for a guy who was very famous in Scotland at the time. And he had been accused of something heinous that he hadn't done. And for the 45 minutes that this woman was speaking, you could hear a pin drop. And the whole audience went through every range of emotion. And I walked away from that room thinking, well, why is that then? Why did the guy who owned the room not move me or influence me in any way? And how then did the woman who got up after him, who was nervous, who stood behind the podium looking at notes, and so what happened there? And what I've come to realize is that remarkable speakers are remarkable speakers because they connect with their audience by being themselves.
Oh, yes.
And it is as simple as that. It is so, you can have the most nervous of speakers, yes, given some guidance and some practice, can become the most influential speakers. We've got this, as audiences, we have this almost internal BS gauge. And we just know when someone isn't being them. So even though the guy before it was wonderful, but what I felt, I sat in the audience that I just wasn't getting to him.
Oh, so, I mean, there's so many things to kind of unravel with that, because I suppose, how do you show up and be you? Because on the one hand, it should be the simplest thing in the world, because there's nobody else but you. But as we know, that can be tricky when you're putting yourself out your comfort zone. So what do you think that lady was doing that enabled her just to be her?
So she aligned all three of her brains, right? And that's going to sound really strange. But I think of it as we're kind of governed by three brains. So our brain, right? Our mind, which is where we store the information. So the words we're going to say. But then we've got our heart brain, right? So our emotions. And that is just simply how we connect to the words we say before we say them and as we're saying them, which of course then affects how the audience receives them. So if you want to move your audience, you yourself have to feel something. And then we've got our gut. So our instinct. And that is kind of our internal gauge of, this is just the thing of just being in the moment, letting yourself speak as you, and also letting your environment affect you whilst you're speaking. Yeah. So should what I've just said, should I just let that sentence just linger for a few seconds? do I actually need to change energy a bit and just change dynamic? Yeah, so it's those sorts of things. The reason so many people are far from remarkable when it comes to speaking is that they find the words they want to say and then they say them, right? And if they can say them in a loud, booming voice, then all the better. Remarkable speakers align all three brains. So yes, they need their mind to pull from it the words they need to speak, but they also colour those words with feeling and intuition. Yeah, so they connect with the words they're saying. They say them as they would when you're sat and speaking to somebody just over coffee. Right? If you tell them something about a story that day that worried you or angered you or made you deliriously happy, you say it with feeling, and the person you're speaking to is there with you. So that's the difference. I think that's the difference.
I love that because it's just often we just need that permission to not overthink it, because as you say, that guy that came on first had probably crafted his approach within an inch of its life, and it should have on paper had that impact. And I think I noticed my nervous system just went, oh we haven't got to put so much pressure on ourselves that we lose connection to ourselves, to our audience, to our environment as we're doing this.
That's it. And actually, your audience doesn't want polish. They want human.
Yeah. So if we were to kind of start to distill this down then into perhaps some practical tips or strategies that kind of people listening, and me, I'm kind of sitting here listening with my notebook, what can we do to improve our public speaking skill? So it might be, as you say, it's a skill that can be learned. So what are some of the parts of that? But also the piece that we talked about reducing anxiety and nerves, because it sounds like you really had to learn that along your journey. So I'd love to hear that story about what you've learned that helps you stay kind of grounded and allow yourself to be you when you're speaking.
Yeah, well, that's the key. The shrinking the nerves thing is the key. So the one thing that gets in the way of us actually accessing that version of ourselves that we are when we are just sat talking to a friend, right, when the stakes aren't high, the thing that gets in the way of that, of course, is our nerves. Okay, so actually, I just think that it's public speaking 101. If you have authenticity, then I think everything else is a nice to have. Yeah, the projection and the clarity and all that sort of stuff, nice to have. If you don't have it, then I don't think anything else matters. Everything else is futile. Okay, so really it's the mindset piece first. So the reason we get scared of a situation is that we magnify the situation. It could be anything. It could be a speech. It could be, an interview. It could be an appraisal, anything. We magnify that situation in our head, and then we shrink our capability to deal with it. So the way you get through that is by doing the reverse. Shrinking the situation in your head and then magnifying your capability to deal with it. Okay, so we'll look at the two just as separate. So first, shrinking the situation. You have to tell yourself something or visualize something that helps you regain a real perspective. And this sounds oversimplified, but I promise you, it is everything. It's absolutely the way to go. And just to illustrate this, I'll tell a little story. It hasn't aged well, this story, though, unfortunately. But I was sat watching this morning. I do work, I promise. But I was sitting watching this morning, I think maybe 7 or 8 months ago, and Catherine Ryan, the comedian, was on it. And she had just finished on The Masked Singer. And Philip Schofield asked her, or said to her, "You don't get nervous, do you?" And she said, No, I don't. I mean, I don't know what it is, right? But so, for example, this morning, I could have said to myself in my head, "Oh my God, Catherine, you are about to sit on the This Morning sofa and you're going to be speaking to Holly Willoughby, national treasures, Holly Willoughby and Philip Schofield, right? And there are going to be cameras pointed at you and there are going to be millions of people watching from home." Or I can tell myself, you are going to sit on a sofa and you are going to talk to 2 other human beings. And that's where I send my brain. Okay, so you have to have a conversation first up, right? And there are a number of kind of steps to this, I think, and we'll probably get there and we'll probably talk about these hopefully. But the most important thing is to tell yourself or visualize something that shrinks the situation, reminds you you are not, the situation you're about to go in is not saving babies. You're not running the country. Okay, and it could be anything actually. So as an actor, when I used to be petrified of auditions, simply saying to myself, Suzie, you are about to walk into one tiny room to audition for one tiny play that most of the world doesn't even know is happening and no one's going to be at, right? You are going to audition in front of 2 or 3 other humans, right? Who both go to the toilet and both get scared and both do all the things that you do. And in a few minutes, this is going to be over. Right. So it's whatever conversation will work in your own head. Some people, and this sounds a bit odd, will remind themselves of their mortality. Right. So, for example, I had a wonderful friend at school who was also a performer. And very sad, she passed away very sadly at the age of 24. And I would tell myself before going into an audition that had me scared, Suzie, Gemma would give her eye teeth to be going into this situation. Come on. This is not life or death. Big girl pants on, effectively, yeah? Walk into the room, grab these few minutes with your both hands, and that just changes everything. It changes everything. So it's that idea of saying something to yourself that shrinks the situation. So that little critic in all of our heads just comes down from the realm of panic and into comfort. And then just coupled with that, you've got to big yourself up. Okay, become bigger than the fear. So just for now, and I'll leave this quite simply, but remember that whatever follows I am in your head will be. So many people make the mistake of going into a situation that's a bit nerve-wracking and going, oh God, I'm so nervous. Oh God, I'm so nervous. Oh, stop being nervous. Even if you're telling yourself to stop being nervous, of course, that's where your focus is going to go. So what happens is your body goes, oh, but your nervous system goes, okay, right, well, you're nervous, so your wishes are command. And all of a sudden, yeah, you go into fight or flight. So if you can change that in your head to, I am, ... excited because... Okay, so exactly, you probably heard this, but exactly the same physiological reaction happens when we're nervous and we're excited, right? So sweaty palms, sweaty pits, heart palpitations, all that sort of stuff. What your body then responds to is what you tell your brain you are, all right? So it could be that you say, I'm excited to walk into that room and smash it, right? Or you might not believe it if you take the pendulum that far. So you might just say something like, I'm looking forward to making a genuine connection with the audience. I'm authentic and real. Or I'm at my best when I speak from my heart and I trust my gut. Or I know my stuff. I have earned my seat at the table, whatever it might be. Yeah. So just more rational self-talk that shrinks the situation and bigs yourself up. And just finally, do it. Right. So confidence, it's the practice bit. Confidence is that feeling you get from the evidence you gather by doing the thing. All right. So you just have to get out there, put yourself in that uncomfortable position. And every single time you do it, that critic in your head will go, oh, okay, however that went, you didn't die. And it's just with every time, it's just going to come a little bit further down in panic.
I love that. The way that you've talked about dialing up and dialing down are so practical. And actually, when I think about it, there's so much, because I know you've put that across in a really compelling way, but there's so much research and scientific evidence-based strategies within there. But I think that's so practical, and people can really kind of approach their speaking engagements or their public speaking opportunities with that in mind.
Yeah, because I mean, the other thing as well, and the only other technique that I would say is most important, and it's inextricably linked to mindset, and that is breathing. It is breathing, yeah. So most of us, did you gasp because you know exactly what I mean?
Yeah.
I think most of us, we don't breathe properly anyway. So a lot of us breathe like birds, yeah. So we snatch short and shallow breaths from the tops of our lungs. So we're not breathing properly anyway. But also when we're about to go into a scary situation, we start to snatch even shorter, shallower breaths from the tops of our lungs, which makes us feel worse, which means we snatch even shorter, shallower breaths, right? Which then sends us into panic, and the whole thing is a vicious circle. When you breathe properly, slowly and deeply, you are sending the message to your brain, I'm safe here. So it's like it short circuits fear. Okay, so you are told so often in stressful situations, take deep breaths, but no one tells you why. And that is why. So play about, right? It's an experiment of one. I love box breathing. Some people breathe in for 4 and out for 6. Yeah, and they just have a longer exhale because that's when your heart rate comes down. But if you can put your hands on your stomach, yeah, and as you take that in breath, imagine sending that breath down to your stomach where you've placed your hands and filling your stomach up like a balloon. And then you exhale. So whatever technique you want to use, if you can just spend a few minutes doing that before you walk into that situation. Of course, there are a good few other techniques to go through. But firstly, mindset and then breathing. 2 of the most important things.
Brilliant. And it's interesting. I was interviewing a lady yesterday, Suzie, who's an Australian, a lady called Dr. Jodie Richardson, and she's an anxiety expert. And she shared with me something that I'd not heard before. And I'm wondering, you may have done from the technicality of your training, but she was telling me it's becoming more and more well known about the polyvagal nerve, about the vagus nerve and how important that is with kind of stress and anxiety. And what she was saying, which I didn't realize, is it starts at the top of your head and basically comes down your face and connects by your ears and then comes down and drops down through your body. But she was saying when your vagus nerve gets on more high alert, so stress or anxious, and it kind of goes from green to amber to red, it constricts your voice box. So that's why when we get nervous, we go kind of more high pitched and I'm imagining from public speaking, voice is important. And I know you say it's not the be all and end all because we need to be authentic first. But I imagine particularly for women, our voice is kind of judged as, do we have authority and are we somebody to be listened to? So I imagine that breathing is even more important for us to realize as well.
Yeah, so important. Yeah, absolutely. So your voice is made up of breath and resonance. It's really interesting, actually, the way you put that about the vagus nerve, because I hadn't heard that order. So that's really helpful. Did you see Lewis Capaldi's set at Glastonbury?
No, but I want to watch it back because I saw clips of it. Is this where he basically his Tourette's kicked in and he couldn't sing and the audience sang it back for him?
Right, exactly. And actually, and of course, it has Tourette's, so it's a difference. But everything suffered as a result of what was happening, the unraveling that was happening in his mind. Right, actually, I think it made for Glastonbury gold, and not just that, because actually, I think he did a beautiful job. And it was just the last couple of songs that then the audience sang back to him. And he was you could tell he was berating himself. He was kicking himself. He was getting himself in a real state on stage. I mean, I think one of just the most beautiful voices we have in the world. And like I said, it did make for wonderful, unforgetful moments on stage. And I think it just brought the whole kind of crowd together, which was lovely. But just that very idea that actually he went on and he sang the first few songs wonderfully, but as his psychological his little critic was going into overdrive and he was tearing himself apart, it showed up physically, and the first thing it attacked was his voice. And so he just, he was struggling. It was almost as if he had got laryngitis on stage. And but he was very open in admitting that he was doing it to himself. So absolutely, the voice is one of the first things to go. And I think for females often, and it's not just us, but we can suffer from something called vocal fry. So if we don't get that support from our breath by breathing deeply, but also being comfortable and relaxed on stage, you're so right, everything tenses up. And there are some people who think that projection, particularly if you're talking to a large crowd, is about pulling everything in and shouting. And of course, that's the quickest way to wreck your voice. So really, it's about thinking down, like being anchored. Is breathing deeply, being supported by your posture first off. Your posture then supports your breath, and then your breath supports your voice. But being in that relaxed state is so key. Yeah.
Oh, and I love kind of the examples that you use, because I think they really, really can bring it to mind as well as understand it kind of logically. And so we've talked about kind of confidence. We've talked about what makes a good public speaker. And I'm wondering, because often we're now doing more in virtual or digital kind of environments. Is there anything we need to pay attention to or do differently if we are in that kind of online platform when we're trying to engage our audience?
Yeah. I mean, there are so many rules that still apply. Yeah. So the things that you would do in terms of getting your mind into a most resourceful state, making your content stand out, making it novel, telling compelling stories, all that sort of stuff. Yeah. Rather than relaying information, which is what a lot of people do when they get an opportunity to present. But there are definitely some differences. So I think online, your audience's attention span is likely to be less than usual because we're more distracted, really, quite frankly. So think of ways to grab your audience from the off. Yeah, just have them sitting forward in their chair, switching their brains on, just thinking, oh, okay, this is going to be a bit different, right? And that might be, it's an icebreaker, or it's a question that gets people talking, or you play a captivating bit of footage if it's appropriate. Yeah. So think about how I can create wow moments just right from the beginning. And of course, that's true actually of in-person presentations. But I think with online, you kind of got to do it a bit more. So you've got to think of ways to break up the monotony of just one person talking at people and bring your audience in as much as you can. And I think as well with online, just make it shorter. Make it succinct. I think these meetings and presentations that go on for 2 or 3 hours, we've all been there, haven't we? I think those things, they're just shooting themselves in the foot, because eventually everyone's just going to drop everything and no one's going to take a single thing from what you say. And then just a couple of technique things. So eye contact. When you're in the room, obviously you want little moments of connection with different people around the room. Yeah, and you want to meet the audience where they are. So remember, you might have someone almost behind you. Remember, you've got someone right at the back. And there's no hard and fast rules to it. If you are in the moment, your gut will tell you when to move on, right? You've made a nice connection with somebody and then move on. Of course, when you're online, you can't look at everyone on the screen, right? I mean, so it's a bit different. I used to think as a trainer, when the world first went pop and everything went online, I used to think when I was delivering a keynote that I had to stare at the red dot or the white dot, because then everyone on the other side of the camera would think that I was looking directly at them. Now, that sends you crazy. So that, as a speaker, just looking at one single dot will send you, and also you don't get the cues back from your audience, which is really important. So simply just looking at people on the screen is absolutely grand. Okay, absolutely grand. However, you might want to, when you really want to punch up something you're saying, you might want to look directly down that camera. Just for that moment, just whilst you're delivering that particular message. Yeah, so I kind of play around with it a little bit. So you can do that. And then, of course, with body language, you haven't got all of your body to convey your message like you do when you're in the room. So just be mindful of that. Some people say that, I know there's research done, particularly when we were all online, of people advising that you I don't know how to do it actually, but you turn your own view off so you can't see yourself because it's more fatiguing. But actually, I think it's, from a feedback point of view, I think it's really important. So if I'm being really expressive, but I'm people can only see a square of me, and so they can only see, my thumb occasionally flick up into the square. That's quite distracting. Yeah. So just be mindful of where you are and what can be seen. And if you need your hands to make a point, then you've got to bring them up far enough for everyone to be able to see them. So it's that sort of thing. But also just think about how are you comfortable? It may be that you want to stick your laptop on an ironing board and stand up and present. Yes, so as long as they can see, most of your torso and your hands and your face, then all good. You just work out what works for you.
That's a really good point, actually. And I love that piece you said earlier about just do it, because it's only from the experimenting that you learn and that the confidence develops, and you start to build your identity as somebody who can be a really great, and I love that word, remarkable speaker. I loved that.
Yeah, and you can't ever get better and look good at the same time. You will fall on your face and probably in front of people. And I have done it a number of times because it's the only way I had to get better. And actually, trying to become a speaker in the first place, and I had to pilot various keynotes and all that sort of stuff. And there were a good few times I just wanted to run off that stage. But it's that bit, you have to lean into it. You've got to lean into it, and you've got to, and it is a bit messy, first off. And the next time will be a bit better, and the next time slightly better. And then the next time you might feel like you've gone back to square one, but the trajectory is going in the right direction. So yeah, do the thing.
Yeah, I love that. So we're going to come on in a minute to how people can find out more about you and your work and how you might be able to help them in this area as well. But if there's just one thing that you want someone listening to this conversation to take away, what would you want that to be?
I think it is the overarching message that mindset is 90% of the battle, right? So if you can get yourself a pre-speech routine, right? And that can be 3 or 4 steps, right? You'll absolutely want it to start with more helpful, empowering self-talk, that shrinks the situation and reminds you of how capable you are to deal with it. But it might also include a visualization technique, where there are loads out there, but again, stepping into a more confident version of you or whatever that might be. It could also be a breathing technique. And then you might want to play some music that chills you out or pumps you up. Yes, if you can get a little routine, and again, experiment of one, find out what works for you, that just gets you in the most resourceful headspace, then you are going to better be able to access more of that version of you that you are when you're sitting down and speaking to a friend.
So how can people, as I say, find out about you and your work, Suzie? Where would you point them towards? And I can put all the details in the show notes.
Oh, yeah, lovely. Thank you very much. So Instagram, good old Insta, Sincerely Suze. You can see me on there. LinkedIn, I still need to get better at, but you'll find me as Suzie Lavington. Art of Brilliance website, which is artofbrilliance.co.uk. Let me say that again in English, artofbrilliance.co.uk. So my trainer page is on there, lots of vids and stuff from me there, details of all the courses and things. But we're about to launch, the Fearless Femme, which is the speaking academy for women that I was speaking about. And we will be, or we are actually at the moment, but not much is there at the minute, the Fearless_Femme. That's us on Instagram, and just about to launch the website, and that's thefearlessfemme.co.uk.
Oh, that sounds amazing. And I imagine right up the street of my audience. So I'll absolutely add all those links in to the show note page. And it just leaves me to say, Suzie, thank you. I've really loved our conversation, and I really appreciate you coming in and sharing your insights and your quest with us, because it's really lovely to hear somebody that's gone on that journey that, isn't somebody that's just a born speaker and, I'm in my, my zone of genius and it all comes so easy to me. Is that, no, you walked this path.
Yeah.
What
I was
like.
Never that. Yeah. Fabulous. Thank you so much. What a pleasure.
If you've enjoyed this episode of Wisdom for Working Mums, please share it on social media and with your friends and family. I'd love to connect with you too. So if you head over to wisdomforworkingmums.co.uk, you'll find a link on how to do this. And if you love the show and really want to support it, please go to iTunes, write a review and subscribe. You'll be helping another working mum find this resource too. Thanks so much for listening.